Inside development. All right. My first insight today, I'm calling it bad apples. And this insight stemmed from a conversation I had with my wife. And so my wife has this kind of, as you said, an idealistic view of the world, as I'm sure a lot of people do. My wife has faith in people generally because she has this view that most people are good, decent people, but among us are some bad apples. And those bad people, and our challenge in life is to avoid those bad apples, to stay out of their way, and we'll get through fine if we can identify and avoid those bad apple people. I don't have that view. To me, it's more like we all are bad apples. And we have this inside of us. And our challenge is not to avoid the bad ones. Our challenge is not to trigger anyone from letting their dark side come out. And so my view is that, it's just nature. And people are designed to, I guess, pounce on weakness like a shark that smells blood. And if you show me your weakness, you're going to give me the temptation to take advantage and exploit it and somehow gain advantage over it. So a challenge is not to avoid the bad apples. The challenge is to not give anyone a reason for their bad apple to come out. What do you think about that?
I think I like both ideas, but I would agree more with your perspective. I think it kind of brings up this idea of morally good and bad, right? And that there is morally good and bad. And I think we're much more complex than that black and white. As a human being, we all have quote unquote, bad days or where we act a certain way and from a societal perspective or a cultural moral perspective, that's considered bad. But I think that kind of brings into play, depends on you, right? Like, let's say you're a hedonist where you pursue pleasure. Anything that you do for yourself is not bad because you're only interested in the pursuit of pleasure, whereas to everyone else, you might seem like a bad apple. And so I think it's absolutely a perspective based thing, but I think we all have the capacity for bad in us. So not triggering someone's bad apple makes sense. But
and the other thing,
someone
my
who
other
already
insight
has it,
is, as a teacher, you teach a classroom full of students, and there's always a couple of students that are the bad apple students. And as a teacher, you learn that it's never the case that the 28 kids that want to be educated and are learning and paying attention bring up those two. It's always the case that those two bring down the level of the entire class. And that's why teachers have to have a tool to remove the bad apples or deal with them. It used to be corporal punishment, but it's getting harder and harder to deal with bad apple kids. Now, I don't want to pick on kids. There's also bad apple teachers, right? But my insight is they kind of they carry more weight than the average person. Like that when it kind of infects everybody else. What do you think about that?
So what you're saying then is that those students are letting their bad apples show and therefore bringing out the bad apples in others, correct? Not the other way around. That makes, I mean, I think it makes sense to me. I think there's the propensity for negativity. It's so much easier to be negative than it is to be positive. And I think we all have totally experience with that, right? In terms of,
you're right.
Let's say something bad happens
to be good. It takes hard work, and that's why I think the natural state of a person is to be indifferent, because it takes no effort at all just to not care. It takes work to care, to have a stance, to have a position, to think it through. And how many of us are doing that work?
I mean, I think you need to understand the rewards of that work to be doing it, right? Like I personally in my life, I know that that work, the human connection, the relationship that you form is worth it. It's worth it. It's worth it to care. But I think you need to be exposed to that to know its worth. And therefore that bad apple quality, it doesn't have to be intrinsic, if that makes sense. It doesn't have to be a part of you. It has to be kind of taught in a certain sense, or you're not taught the good, let's say, and you've got this. It's so easy to be negative, so you resort to
But I
that because
wonder,
you don't
it
know the
reminds
access
me
to good.
of, it also reminds me of the black sheep of the family. Is the
Mm-hmm.
black sheep of the family innately corrupted, different than everybody else? Or has the rest of the family decided to impose this label? And then because of the labeling theory, you just live up to the name, or you even start to believe that you're a bad apple or a black sheep. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I think, frankly, I don't think the bad apple or the black sheep, as you say, is intrinsically bad. I think it's all perspective, right? I think a
But then why would a
difference
group
is
conspire? Why would a family conspire to make their family member feel this way? Or and I wonder if there's a need for a group to put somebody down to make themselves feel better, or if there's even a need for the bad apple to gain this attention that they otherwise would not have, and then to kind of play into that hand.
yeah. I think the unknown or the differences kind of, I think it scares you, right? Let's say, as from a family perspective, if someone is different and the parents don't understand those differences, and it's unknown to them, and they think because they've lived their life a certain way,
Yeah,
their entire life, they understand it, they know it works, right?
yeah,
Because they've gotten to this point, then they would want their children to understand that in the same sense.
yeah,
And if there's a difference there, there's a difference in understanding, even between generations, you can see that, right?
mhm.
Change in perspective or mindsets around certain contemporary issues, whether political, social, and so on. I think that definitely plays a role,
Yeah.
but that difference is not intrinsically bad. I think that's probably, at least to me, that makes sense as to why someone would, in a group, make the group ideology homogenous, because they don't understand.
All right. All right. Moving on to our next insight. This one is called choice. And so I'm fascinated by the idea of choices, decisions, because one of the quotes that comes up in our debating class is, "We are not products of our circumstance. Rather, we are products of our choices and our decisions." And one of the amazing things that I don't know whether people realize, but we make about 250 choices and decisions every single day, even
Wow.
before we roll out of bed in the morning. But from the time we wake up and roll out of bed, we've made about 10 or 15 decisions and choices.
Mm-hmm.
Should I hit the snooze button? Should I open my eyes? And so on and so on. And so I always tell my students, so imagine if your whole day consists of 250 choices, and we are the product of our choices. That means if you have a good day, it means because you've made a majority of good choices. And maybe
Mm.
that's what our parents are always on about, because there is room for error, right? You can make 10 bad choices if you have 250, but if you're making majority bad choices, you're going to have a bad day and then a bad
Yeah.
year, right, over the course of time. So you cannot choose what you feel, but you can choose what you say and what you
Yeah.
do. And so, what do you think about all of that?
Hmm. I think, does that imply then that you are complete control beyond your perspective? Are you in complete control of what happens to you? Because you have a bad day and you make the right choices. Um, what you're saying is that even if I make all the right choices, then I cannot have a bad day, which doesn't
Well,
seem
but no,
like it
what
makes
I'm
sense.
saying is, even if you are having a bad day, let's say you've been imprisoned
Yep.
wrongfully and you're innocent sitting in prison, but even in prison, you can make a choice to do hard time, be angry, to rail against
Mm.
the man and fight, or you can make the choice to become educated, to become everyone's lawyer in prison, to gain some kind of
Mm.
reputation for yourself, to do a letter writing campaign. One of the great things about human beings is that we can choose one thought over the other. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people realize the power that they have. Like, you don't have to become complacent in anything that you're doing. If I'm bored, if I feel like my life is lacking action, I can make a choice to change that. I can make a choice to change that right now. And I think it's very, very, I guess, encouraging, or I just love that idea that
Mm-hmm.
we can just make decisions. We're one decision away from a completely different life.
I actually love that, Tamer. I think that's a great way to see things, and you've put in words something that I've tried to implement in my own life, And that's what I would refer to as a big picture mindset. And so we've talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but this to me means that if something happens, if something negative occurs, it's how you see it. It's how your shift in perspective, it's how you deal with it. And that is a choice in itself, right? And it's looking for those silver linings. It's choosing to see maybe this much good in this much bad, but then you still feel that you've taken something from it. It's a growth mindset, right? And it's all about there will be difficulties. There will be bad days, right? You will make bad choices. Like you said, there is room for error, and there is room for the unpredictable as well, right? For things to just kind of happen and hit you in the face as they do in life for so many of us. And I think that power of choice of which you speak is overlooked and very special. I completely agree with
it
you.
is. I'm glad we talked about it. That's what
Yeah.
insights are to me. It's like it's the in-betweens. It's the things that don't get talked about. Remember, the in
Mm-hmm.
between two other topics, we have this one. And in debating terms, what I say, a lot of a lot of variables, a lot of things can happen that are unexpected, external things happening to you. And for those things, you have to be just sort of you have to rise to the occasion, be spontaneous. You have to be kind of well trained to deal with spontaneous external factors. But a lot of things in debating are within your control, and you can make the choice to be prepared or not be prepared. And so, if you choose to not prepare the things that you can control, and then when those things spin out of control, that's because of your choice. That's something you could have controlled. So I think you have to be, like you said, there's a power in that that's underappreciated or not recognized by most people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You've said it perfectly.
All right, great. All right, let's move on to the next segment.